No, don't start with Trails into Reverie. With that out of the way, let's start the video. Trails into Reverie is a hard game to assess at times because of how reliant on the previous games of the series it is, to an even greater degree than any previous Trails game, but that's also what makes this game so wonderful. We know this is our last journey with quite a few of these characters for a while, and while their arcs were mainly wrapped up in Cold Steel 4, there's always more. Part of the nature of the Trails series is that time proceeds after the Sky Games, after Crossbell, after Erebonia, and more adventures lie in wait. As the promotional materials say, Reverie is the end, but also the beginning. Trails into Reverie is a fitting conclusion to the tale of Western Zemeria while also acknowledging that there is still much left to accomplish and discover in this land. Trails into Reverie is the 10th game in the Trails series, developed by Nihon Falcom and published by Falcom in Japan, Clouded Leopard elsewhere in Asia, and NIS America everywhere else. The game came out in Japan in August of 2020 for PS4 with later ports to PC and Switch. The Western release happened on July 7th, 2023 for PS4, PC, Switch, and PS5. Unless you're in Oceania, then the release happened on July 14th. Reception to the game has generally been positive from critics both in Japan and abroad. I don't envy the task of a reviewer of this game if they haven't been playing previous entries. Sales-wise, the game topped Japanese sales charts in its first week on PS4, but as usual, getting exact figures overall is difficult, and then adding in Western sales makes it near impossible. Like the previous games in the series, Reverie picks up not long after the events of its predecessor, Trails of Cold Steel 4. 5 months after the events of the Great Twilight, things on the continent of Zemeria are starting to calm down. In Crossbell, focus has turned to finally securing their independence, led by their heroes, the SSS. In Erebonia, the ramifications of the war and the Great Twilight is leading to the people re-examining the Empire and their place within it, but disagreement and wounds remain. Our two previous protagonists, Lloyd Bannings from Crossbell and Reen Schwarzer from Erebonia, are at the center of this transition along with a new third figure who goes by the name C. Together, along with the SSS and their allies, Class 7 and their allies, and the Miserable Sinners, they will be confronting a new threat threatening the world. The events of the Great Twilight and the previous games may be in the past, but their impact may stretch further than anyone thought possible. Can these three groups find out what is going on in the Empire and Crossbell and bring a lasting peace? Trails' story strength is in its world building and character writing. Due to the nature of Reverie, the world building isn't as prevalent because we are dealing with mainly Crossbell and Erebonia, which most players are very familiar with. There are sprinklings of details about other states and some meteor details about Calvard, but it's very sparse compared to usual. That shift away from building locations allows the game to really narrow in on characters instead, with the most notable arcs to me going to Reen, the Crossbell gang, and all of the characters in C's route. I was more than happy to see how these characters grew and developed in this new arc of their lives for those we've known before. Even after many games with these characters, there are still ways they manage to surprise me, and that makes me cherish them even more. I especially enjoyed how the events of the game further enhanced my love for and understanding of the Crossbell main cast. Our newest characters also fit seamlessly into the world and have strong arcs of their own with potential for more down the line. If the character writing is what you enjoy about Trails, Trails into Reverie will not disappoint. The cast is absolutely ginormous though, so there are many favorites who are simply not going to have their time in the spotlight during the main story. Reverie does have a way to show off more from those characters, but I'll get more into that later in the video. The story progression is also wildly different from previous Trails games. You follow 3 different routes of the story, but there are times when they intersect, sometimes in small brief moments, and other times they completely overlap. You are going to be spending some time bouncing between different groups on the same day in various locations to gain new perspectives. By the midpoint of the game, I was able to identify events that happen in one timeline and guess that our other protagonists were involved in said event from a different perspective. It was cool to see and experience the new context and how it all fits together. At its best, these interweaving narratives set up some truly excellent stories across the chapters. At their worst, though, the switching narrative can drag the pacing to a halt. Reverie is more good than bad when it comes to story, but the choice of presenting the narrative did have its drawbacks that make me wish I could play through again without some of the interruptions. Trails into Reverie's combat is mainly a rehash from Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4, but there are some new wrinkles worth talking about even for series veterans. The biggest addition is the United Fronts. By using up one of the assault gauge bars, which in the past was just used for initiating battles on the map, you can choose to have the whole party active and supporting characters attack all the enemies, use arts on all of them, or heal the party while also restoring 2 brave points. You do need at least 5 characters to pull off a United Front. The United Fronts paired with the always powerful Brave Orders and the rush and burst attacks are a deadly combination. They may be somewhat broken, but that's not surprising as a new Trails gameplay mechanic. The only other combat addition that I saw while playing then was the new turn order bonus of 0 crafts, which, like 0 arts, allows you to use any craft without using any CP. I had a blast with those because I could get free S-crafts off with them, or if an enemy was going to get it, I could use an S-craft to steal it from them while retaining the S-craft for future use. Neither of these massively changes the structure of gameplay in Reverie, but both were a lot of fun to play around with as a new tool in our already strong arsenal. Another impact from the story progression change is that the gameplay is far more focused on combat than previous games. What I mean by that is that in past games you were assigned various tasks to do on rest days in between events, doing quests and the like that may have nothing to do with combat. Reverie does not have these moments for the most part because the events of the game are so quick-paced that rest days are pretty much just travel days between locations for our characters. I do kind of miss them, but I also would never argue that the game is lacking in content, what with the true Reverie corridor available. If you only engage in the main story and gameplay of Trails into Reverie, the game is remarkably short by Trails standards, but you'd also be majorly missing out because the true Reverie corridor has so much to offer. The True Reverie Corridor is an extra dungeon that unites all of the characters in a separate space to explore, train up, and have fun. There is so much to do in the True Reverie Corridor, which I will go through now, starting with the dungeon itself. The dungeon itself is split into stratums that have randomly generated levels that you can reorganize at the main garden area if you want a different layout or challenge. Your main mission is to get to the next elevator to move on through until you face a big midpoint or endpoint boss for the stratum. Once a stratum is complete, you have to wait a little while before the story will let you open up the next stratum. There are unique enemies to fight along the way in the levels and many treasure chests to collect. You also have some traps or challenging areas that incorporate status effects such as Zeal or Blind if your party fights an enemy within that area. After defeating the Guardian Beasts, you can't miss them, they're huge. Or the bosses, you'll also get sealing orbs that can be unsealed back at the base. Gold sealing stones give you characters for your crew, blue sealing stones give you access to daydreams, side stories with a particular set of characters, red sealing stones give you new mini-games or expanded levels to the games once you've unlocked them, and silver sealing stones give you new accessories, quartzes, or costumes. The first 3 are the ones I mainly focused on, and there are a limited number to collect in each stratum. Beyond the main dungeon, there are 2 other events that can show up while out in the Reverie Corridor. Void Spires, where treasure is hidden behind a dark barrier that can be dispelled once some of your characters back at base beat back a wave of enemies, and Dreamland Hills, a new seasonally themed area with lots of crystals to break to get lots of Sepith, and rare critters such as Shining Palms to fight. All of these encourage further and repeated exploration of the Reverie Corridor, and while the main story ends, the corridor remains and expands in the postgame. So don't worry if you haven't collected everything yet by the time the credits roll. You'll have your chance to go back. Back in the garden, it's time to get our side content on. While the game does employ what seems like a gacha formula for the sealing stones, the only one that actually appears to be random are the gold stones, and you can reset those by save scumming and refighting the boss you got them from. The daydreams function very similarly to the doors from Trails in the Sky the Third. You go on a smaller adventure with a smaller group of characters that reveals something about other events going on in Zemeria. This includes characters within your party and the main story, and sometimes some NPCs from previous games, and in one instance, a future game. I love the character moments in Trails, and that's pretty much exactly what these daydreams are. Character moments with either familiar groups, or sometimes a new pair that just makes sense. The redstones are the minigames, starting with the one big returning minigame of Pom Pom Party. You get an initial set of opponents to play against and unlock more as you progress through the main story. However, to get all of the opponents, you'll need to use the phantasmal shards you get for completing missions to unlock them. Don't worry, they don't cost a lot. The big phantasmal shard upgrades you'll want to save up for are things like boosting max brave points, increasing the assault gauge, increasing united front power, and more support slots. All these upgrades carry over into the main story, so these upgrades are incredibly helpful. Back to the minigames, there are a few others you can do from this menu, such as Magical Girl Elisa LS, a flying shooter game coupled with an anime premise about magical girls fighting the demon prince Rin. Those of you who played Tokyo Xanadu may recognize this premise from that game and locations from the game in this game. You also have Project Tierfing, which is an action mech combat minigame where you control Rin as he learns to control the new Tierfing soul that he's using. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, hosted by Beryl, which is a quiz show covering various facts about the Trails characters and world. Then of course, we have the beach episode with Class 7 and their allies. There is also an extra one with the SSS and their allies that you can get as DLC. At the beach, you have 3 activities you can use your tickets to engage with. A banana boat collect the flags while Mishi drives the boat game, a watermelon cutting game, and an intimate conversation with your girl of choice that includes VR support for those who want to feel up close and personal to them. You can get a lot out of these minigames, and even more as you progress and get new challenges, episodes, or tickets for each one. As for the side content that is not part of the Ceiling Stones, the 2 big returning minigames are of course Fishing, which functions exactly the same as Cold Steel 3 and 4, and Vantage Masters, which is mostly the same but with some upgraded masters. Fishing can be done in the Reverie Garden and in the main story, but Vantage Masters is only available in the garden. As for other collectibles, you have your books, your recipes, battle information, and character notes to collect. Along with various other missions, these can be used to get RP and rank up as you pursue an S rank overall. You'll have to work hard to get that though, harder than any previous Trails game in my experience at least. Trails Into Reverie looks and plays very similarly to past games as one would expect. This is the final game Falcom made using the Fire engine that they used for all of the Cold Steel games plus Tokyo Xanadu, and for every game after Reverie, they have used a new in-house engine. That being said, the swan song for the engine was a strong one with the best animation and cutscene direction for the series in the West so far, plus a brief glimpse of the new engine. The character designs are still an absolute goldmine of amazing and unique designs, and the locations feel vibrant. Musically, the game has quite a few good tracks, mainly returning ones along with a couple really good new ones. I like the Crossbell ones especially. I do feel the music though is simply unremarkable in several spots that previous Falcom games never had issues with. The English VAs almost all return for Reverie and give spectacular performances along with the new characters as well. I would be remiss if I did not talk about some of the issues cropping up with the game upon launch. A few I can't comment on because I never encountered them and they're affecting different consoles, but the big one for me, playing the PC port, was the link attack bug. Any character that was not playable in CS4 can only get link attacks as their link levels rise with characters. No cover, no rage, no anything else. PHC Games, the ones responsible for the PC port, are aware of the issue and working on it, so I have faith it will be fixed soon. There has been a fan workaround though, so check that out if you are experiencing the issue, at least on PC. I did finish the entire game with the bug in place, so the game isn't unplayable in any way. Past issues that I've encountered though with Trails releases, such as overflowing text boxes or lines still in Japanese instead of English, are a thing of the past. The UI and UX of the game remains easy to navigate and use, but Reverie just has so many characters and things to keep track of that the experience will be affected no matter how smooth the menu usage is. You're just gonna spend a lot of time equipping people's quartzes and accessories. Trails Into Reverie is a worthy finale to the Crossbell and Cold Steel arcs, which should not be skipped. Gonna get that one out of the way before people start talking about skipping Reverie like they talked about skipping Sky the Third. While innovation on the gameplay side of things is low, the story is a fun ride with a mostly good new twist on the Trails formula. The Reverie corridor is rich with content that you can sink many hours into during the main and post-game. Reverie offers a lot of bang for its buck, and we're going to need it now that the next step in the process of bringing games over moves on to Kuro no Kiseki, with a brief stopover to Boundless Trails later this year. I really enjoyed Trails into Reverie, and I hope this video helped you get a better idea of what you're in for with this game, and you enjoyed the game too. Thank you to NIS America for the code to cover the game, and I am ever grateful to those who show their support for the channel in the YouTube-approved ways, as it is the only way to grow on this platform. So I must ask you again for your likes, comments, and shares. If you are not already subscribed, please do so, and thank you again. Have a great day, and happy gaming.